Was an interesting weekend, and I think, the path to the SEC championship, it was murky for the last 2 weeks. It's getting clearer. It's not set in stone. You got about 2 to 3, solid games that you're going to have to depend on. We'll give you our projected SEC title matchup at the end of the segment. But let's start it off. We'll go A, B, C, D, and we'll save the F for last, unfortunately. A, Florida. Might spoil the F. 27-16 win versus LSU. Big win at home. Like we said on our instant reaction Saturday. Napier bought time. Bought a lot of time. I mean, obviously Florida was supporting him going into the LSU game, and shout out to them for doing that, because if you put him in a situation where the pressure mounted and he thought, I'm playing for my job, the whole situation changes. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. However, the situation that happened, the situation that played out, Florida saying, this is our guy, he doesn't have anything to worry about, focus on your team and focus on Saturday, it panned out. Whether that's related or not, we'll never know, but it's an interesting look. Also, DJ Lagaway, solid QB for the future. Really impressed with what he brought to the table. I'm not going to compare him to someone like Lenore Sellers, but look, the SEC has some younger quarterbacks that are going to be on the come up, and I think, for the next few years, you're going to be getting used to those names. Let's move on to the B. Georgia. 31-17 win versus Tennessee, but it wasn't just any win. It was a big game for Carson Beck, and he needed it, honestly. We've been talking about the turnovers. We've been talking about the offensive slump, quite frankly, for Kirby Smart and those Georgia Bulldogs. Well, guess what? 347 yards through the air for Carson Beck. 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. It's been a while since he's had a clean game, especially a clean primetime SEC big implication game. He got it done with no ETN. Obviously, Frazier got in, got about 68 yards, had some decent plays on the ground without their main guy. But Georgia, I think, has a shot. They control their destiny. If they win out, obviously they're going to get into that 12-man format. They're not going to get pushed out like they did when it was a 4-man. It's a good turnaround, though, because at first you were worried. You were wondering. I think the message that Nick Saban gave to Kirby Smart after Alabama beat Georgia, where sometimes you just need that kick in the rear end. Sometimes you just need that extra motivation from that loss. It could be playing out into fruition here. C, South Carolina, 34-30 win versus Mizzou. Now, hold up. Let's pump the brakes, because it was a good ranked win for the Gamecocks, right? We needed the momentum, right? We predicted this in our top 3 game segment, but we did not predict this margin. It's a 4-point win. We thought it would be bigger. Why? 2 touchdowns in the final 1 minute and 30 seconds. So shout out to Mizzou. They finally, I'm not going to say playing to their expectations, but they had a decent game. And I know, the injury implications. I know all the setbacks that the Tigers have kind of underwent. But it was a pretty good game. South Carolina, nice comeback. You're building your momentum, and now you're looking like a potential favorite. Not this season, but next year, I think you could play yourself into the mix as a program that people are going to have to pay attention to. SEC is always going to have 5 to 7 big names that people are rumbling and throwing around in the offseason. I mean, you're a big conference, big names. But seriously, I think that South Carolina could push into the upper echelon. Might sound ridiculous, might sound crazy, but if I'm a recruit and I'm looking for somewhere to cut my teeth and I might not be the 5-star, the Bryce Underwood, the Harlem Berry, I think South Carolina, I think Vandy, I think those type of lower level, and they're not even lower, those mid-level SEC teams, they're pushing themselves up toward the pack. Who got the D this week for the SEC grades? Tennessee. You went up 10-0 on the Bulldogs. Lead dissolved. You're on the road in the SEC with a nice, hold on one of the best teams in recent memory, over the past half decade, at least, for what it's worth. Tennessee had 2 touchdowns on the ground in the first half, could not get the pass going to save their life. I have a question that I'm going to pose for the potential Volunteer fans or just college football fans in general. Is Nico the guy for next year? Do you develop him? Do you hold him? And do you get him in this scheme to just keep growing? He's shown flashes. He has potential, obviously. But does Josh Heupel have a serious question on his hands where does he need to pull in a quarterback from a portal? Do they need to have some type of competition and just at least either A, give some motivation to Nico and try to push him into, his potential and get him, maybe not necessarily more of a passer, maybe it's not his game, but they have to obviously figure something out, because the lack of pass game, the lack of offensive production when Dylan Sampson can't carry you with 2 touchdowns and 150 yards, it's glaringly obvious. And I think, going into this offseason, there's going to be some questions and eyebrows raised. I'm raising them right now. Could be wrong. React in the comments. F, for the second week in a row. Had to save this one for last. I couldn't rip open the segment with this, but LSU looked like the worst SEC team, in my opinion, for the last 2 weeks. They're in a rough spot. Yeah, they got injuries, they had suspensions, and they had a lot of confusion, apparently, with the headsets. They still have an opportunity to build toward next year. There's some bright spots. One of the biggest, look, the run game's picking up. He had 44 attempts, 130 yards, wasn't your best game, but you're averaging 25 to 28 carries. You almost doubled it, and now you're in a situation where that production is obviously going to increase. If you can pair that next year, a Caden Durham with a Harlan Berry, maybe a Caleb Jackson, if he somehow stays, it's an interesting path, right? You got a lot of moves that these SEC teams who are on the outside looking in at this playoff can make to somehow push themselves into that top 12 next year. It's not impossible. I mean, I'll give Coach Kelly some credit. Like he said, you do have a potential to be 9-1. There is a way where LSU can make some things shake, but there's also a way where they dip under 500 too. So I see both angles. Let's project the SEC title real quick. So got on our Reddit thread, our crazy rabbit hole, if you will, and we were looking through different matchups, just trying to find a way for madness to ensue, really. Try to find any type of way to see the standing shuffle, all kind of upsets. We were doing it all. We were doing, what if Bama loses in the Iron Bowl? What if LSU drops both? Does it affect anybody else's standings? And here's what we've learned. So the first thing, I don't really see a path to the SEC title for Ole Miss. I don't think they're going to be able to make it work. However, playoffs are still on the table. I will admit that. I think the team's pretty good. Voters are going to want to put them in. You got about 5 SEC teams in the top 12. We'll get to that in AP breakdown. I'm going to make sure on that one. But another note, winner of the A&M game and the Texas game, that's pretty much going to determine their path. If A&M wins, I believe that they're going to slide in, probably play Alabama. And I think if Texas wins, more than likely it looks like Texas and Alabama. But Georgia does have an opportunity. I think if Bama loses, that's when Georgia slides in. But as of right now, Georgia has no SEC games left, so they're really at the whim of somebody else messing up and them getting in. But like we said, Bama, Georgia, Texas, and then Texas A&M are your contenders. I think the last two, UT and A&M, they're going to fight, try to somehow gain some contendership into the playoffs, but I think the loser's going to drop out. That's just my take. Real quick before we react to the AP poll, shout out Happy Dad. You know the drill. Gluten-free, no artificial flavors, low in sugar. You know where to get it. You're shopping at Rouse's, Albertsons, Walmart. Slide down to the liquor aisle, grab you a case, tell them the Verdant Verdict sent you. If you want the Happy Dad merch, we got a link in the description for you. You click the link, you go pick what you want. We got a code for you, Verdant15, 15% off at checkout. Once again, thank you to the team.